From the Telesur studios in Caracas, Venezuela, welcome back to From the South. I am Luis de Jesus. Let's take a look at our headlines. The Pan American Health Organization has warned that young people are the principal agents of COVID-19 infections in the region. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at demonstrators in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as they protested the shooting by a police officer of an African-American man on Sunday. And Israeli occupation forces fired phosphorus bombs at Lebanese territories, Lebanon's television channel reported today. We start right away with the news. Stay with us. The Pan American Health Organization warned on Tuesday that young people are the main focus of the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in the region. The agency indicated that there is a similar pattern in the concentration of cases between 20 and 59 years. They claim that 70% of virus-related deaths occur mostly in people over the age of 60. They consider the possibility of a second wave of contagions following the increase in the rate of new cases in recent weeks across the continent.
In the past 6 weeks, deaths in our region have doubled, and the number of new COVID-19 infections reported has more than doubled, rising from 5.3 million on July 1st to almost 12 million cases today. Data trending in that direction typically signals an urgent need to implement public health measures to slow the spread of COVID-19, such as social distancing, sheltering in place, and limits on public gatherings. It indicates that younger people are primarily driving the spread of the disease in our region.
But business and economic sectors are pressuring national authorities to reopen economies despite the region reporting the highest daily numbers of COVID-19 cases. El Salvador reactivated its economy on Monday after over 100 days of lockdown in the midst of a clash between the executive that intended to implement a phased reopening and the Supreme Court, which declared the move unconstitutional. Meanwhile, although Colombia reported over 10,500 new COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours, President Iván Duque has announced the lifting of the mandatory lockdown across the country starting on September 1st. In Ecuador, which began easing COVID-19 restriction measures in June, authorities continue to promote tourism activities in the cities of Guayaquil and Quito, despite being the COVID-19 hotspot of the country. Meanwhile, representatives of the so-called Lima Group, made up of right-wing Latin American governments, have vowed to hold a forum to address the post-COVID-19 economic recovery. And the head of Colombia's Institute for Development and Peace Studies has stressed that the murders of social and indigenous leaders have climbed during the COVID-19 pandemic.
En medio de la pandemia,
amidst the pandemic, the disputes have increased between regular, illegal, mafia, and all kinds of groups over land, over different businesses such as drug trafficking or mining. All this compels the civil population to also organize to control territories, as they want to defend themselves from infection and hunger and establish solidarity. These groups clash with the communities. They try to recruit young people, establish local dictatorships, and this is seriously happening, specifically in the border area with Ecuador and the border with Venezuela.
And Jamaica held on Tuesday for the first political debate ahead the general elections on September 3rd. During the debate, the People's National Party and the Jamaica Labour Party met to discuss and debate on social issues. During the event, they addressed the COVID-19 effects in Jamaican population, mainly in matters of job losses and school activities stoppage. Representatives of the ruling Labour Party pointed out that the achievements made by during its governance, such as the creation of over 100,000 jobs and a poverty decline of 40%. Meanwhile, representatives of the People's National Party standed to say they will battle corruption within the current political system that they say have prevented Jamaicans of a better quality of life. The United Nations Commission on Human Rights has denounced murders and torture in Bolivia following the coup against President Evo Morales in November last year. The report presented by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, expressed concern after 9 months and no explanation on the massacres that occurred in Sacaba and Sencata as the coup developed. The report takes into account more than 150 interviews of witnesses, victims, civil society representatives, and authorities. Among the human rights violations, the report highlights murders, torture, mistreatment, and arbitrary detentions by the de facto regime, which continues to be in power today. Political figures in Argentina have rejected remarks by former President Eduardo Duhalde, who has claimed a coup could be in the making. The former president said it was ridiculous to think that legislative elections set for October next year would take place, claiming that given the current economic crisis, Argentina was at risk of seeing another military dictatorship imposed. The remarks were dismissed and rejected by most of the political class of the country. Governor of La Pampa, Sergio Silioto, pointed out that the statements sought to destabilize the democratic system while also stressing that there are no conditions for a coup to take place in that country. Likewise, a lawmaker for the center-right political coalition Together for Change, Daniel Lipovetsky, stressed that the government would defend democracy, state institutions, and the holding of the elections in 2021. Airlines unions protested outside Copa Airlines headquarters in Panama City to demand solutions for those who have been laid off. Workers also claimed that the company intends to reduce employees' working hours until December 2021 amid a crisis in the aviation sector triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Members of the Panamanian Union of Onboard Auxiliaries denounced that Copa would be promoting voluntary withdrawals that in the end would be resignations in practice. COPA has suspended contracts, negotiated early retirements, or agreed half-day work with its more than 7,000 workers in Panama.
We have accepted the reduction of working hours until December 2020, not until December 2021, as demanded by the company.
Approximately 5,000 unionized employees are affected by contract suspensions.
We'll be right back after this very short break, so stay with us. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at demonstrators in the U.S. city of Kenosha in Wisconsin Monday night as they protested the shooting by a police officer of Jacob Blake. According to Blake's father, his son was paralyzed from the waist down after being shot in the back 8 times in front of his children on Sunday. A crowd of protesters gathered for the second night in a row on Monday near the Kenosha County Courthouse building to express their rejection of the latest example of police brutality and systemic racism in the U.S. Governor of the state of Wisconsin, Tony Evers, who denounced the shooting, announced the deployment of 125 members of the National Guard on Monday, with responsibility for guarding infrastructure. And hundreds of protesters marched down Manhattan's Fifth Avenue in New York on Monday night to voice their condemnation of the police attack on Jacob Blake in the state of Wisconsin. Demonstrators called for the resignation of President Donald Trump as well as Vice President Mike Pence due to their repressive policies. In the state of Texas, Galveston County has issued mandatory evacuations for portions of Galveston and Bolivar Peninsula ahead of the arrival tomorrow of Hurricane Laura. Bolivar Peninsula expects storm surges of 5 to 8 feet. More mandatory evacuations were expected to be issued for other cities. Hurricane Laura approached Tuesday on the 3-year anniversary of Hurricane Harvey, making landfall with Category 4 strength in Texas. Laura is expected to arrive tomorrow night as a Category 3 hurricane. Mass evacuations along the coast also began to get another test of the state's handling of the coronavirus, which clobbered Texas this summer and has resulted in more than 11,000 deaths. In Belarus, supporters of re-elected President Alexander Lukashenko gathered to reject the calls of the opposition for new elections. Supporters concentrated near the well-known Komarovsky market in the capital Minsk. They rejected what they consider is the interference of Western countries in the recent violent demonstrations that seek to delegitimate and ignore the results of the last presidential elections. The European leader, with more years of service in the presidency of his country, accused NATO troops of raids near its borders. And British citizens took to the streets on Tuesday to demonstrate against government actions to prevent refugees crossing of the English Channel, supported by right-wing factions and conservative lawmakers. Demonstrators gathered outside the Home Office building in London to demand the government to allow refugees in the country after British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said on Sunday that additional Navy personnel and aircraft were being sent to help tackle a sharp rise in migrant crossings of the Channel. Meanwhile, the Immigration Minister, Chris Philip, held talks with counterparts in Paris amid calls to increase pressure on France to prevent migrants arriving in UK waters. Citizens have raised their voice addressing the refugees crossing as a matter of humanitarian cooperation.
I just don't understand why it is that there are so many people who are scared of people who've lost everything. And there's just so much misunderstanding. And if only people could see the real situation.
A lot of these immigrants are fleeing from war, are fleeing because of their sexuality, are fleeing because of the discrimination, are fleeing because of many different reasons. And to actually come here and to fight all obstacles, including their life, they put in at risk. Some have not been fortunate to make it, but to come here and to make a better life. But the government are making it harder for them to come here. This is appalling. This is not right. This is inhumane.
And Germany has presented an economic report that shows its biggest slump since 1970. The Federal Statistical Office revised the quarter-on-quarter contraction in gross domestic product down from the 10.1% it initially reported at the end of July. Yet the recent GDP decline was of 9.7%, still the worst slump in post-war history. The institute addresses company investments and exports all collapsed at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, stimulus measures designed to support consumers and businesses during the first half of 2020 resulted in a budgetary deficit of 51.6 billion euros. In Spain, a demonstration took place in Barcelona in front of the local soccer stadium as fans of the Barcelona club expressed their displeasure with the team leadership demanding that the Argentine star Lionel Messi stay in the team. Club fans gathered Tuesday's evening at club headquarters to demand the resignation of President Josep Bartomeu, in turn expressing their desire for the Argentine star to remain in the Catalan entity. Club Barcelona spokesperson confirmed Messi's request to retire from the Blaugrana team 11 days after the big defeat against Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And Lebanon's Al-Manar television channel announced that the Israeli occupation forces had fired phosphorus bombs at Lebanese territories in the southern towns of Eula and Meis al-Habal. Israeli media initially said the firing was amid concerns over a possible infiltration near Kibbutz Menara in the Upper Galilee area located near the Lebanese border and the Israeli-occupied side of Golan. The firing of more than 30 flares was followed by orders compelling Israeli settlers in 5 communities to stay at home. The Lebanese media also said Israeli aircraft had been spotted after violating the country's airspace in the south. And following an official meeting with the British Foreign Secretary on Tuesday, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas stressed that peace with Israel can only be achieved based on international law and the Arab Peace Initiative. He also urged the UK to recognize the State of Palestine.
We say that it is time for Britain to recognize the State of Palestine, which will help achieve justice, inspire hope, and establish the two-state solution based on the 1967 borders for Palestine and Israel to live in peace and security. Peace will not come by bypassing the Palestinians, by normalizing the Arab countries, and it will not be achieved through an illusion of peace for peace, but rather will be done on the basis of international law and the Arab Peace Initiative.
Our commitment to the Palestinian people, our commitment to a two-state solution, the United Kingdom's opposition to annexation of territory, and above all, we want to see the improvement of the lives of the Palestinian people, which can only be secured through a lasting peace negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians.
A tripartite summit among Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq was held on Tuesday in Amman, aiming to strengthen political and economic relations among these nations. The meeting was attended by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi. They discussed several issues of common interest. Authorities took the opportunity to call for intensified efforts to find a political solution to the situation in Syria, Libya, and Yemen. The meeting also aimed coordination of strategies to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and establish actions to ensure food security in the region. And the World Health Organization Regional Director for Africa announced that Africa was free of wild polio virus on Tuesday, noting that no cases had been reported on the continent for the past 4 years.
It is among the greatest honors of my life to join you for this celebration of the eradication of wild polio virus from the 47 member states of the WHO African region. This is the second virus to be eradicated from our continent after the eradication of smallpox 40 years ago.
And addressing the virtual session of the 70th WHO Regional Committee for Africa this Tuesday, African representatives called to strengthen healthcare systems to better face emergencies and expand response capacity.
It has affected all of us. As the Director General once rightly said, it is a common enemy of mankind. In Africa, we quickly felt the impact of the pandemic due to our weak health systems, coupled with the highest disease burden in the world.
Coverage, it has become very clear in our response to COVID-19 that if we are not vigilant, we may lose the gains that we have already obtained from the fight on tuberculosis, fight against HIV, and even some of the basic essential services such as immunization and reproductive health, and it becomes very.
And Sudanese and Ethiopian authorities held official meetings on Tuesday to discuss bilateral relations, including on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and the peace talks in neighboring South Sudan.
The day you spent with us here, with your very high delegation, gave us an opportunity to talk about a number of issues that are very high in our agenda and to our two nations, not to mention the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a project which we think has huge promise, not only for our two nations, but for the three nations, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan.
We should work together. We have to focus on peace and development, also win-win solution in each we might have to discuss between the two countries as well other neighboring countries.
With regard to the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the two sides emphasized the importance of exerting all efforts to reach a successful end to the ongoing tripartite negotiations under the aegis of the African Union, which will lead to a formulation from which everyone will benefit from, and make the Renaissance Dam a tool for regional integration between the riparian countries.
And like that, we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember that you can find this and many other stories at our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for Telesur English. I'm Luis De Jesus. Thank you for watching.